Our speaker today is Mr. Glen Evans. He comes to us through Carolyn, who's recommended him as a speaker. He's with Art for Humanity. They're a volunteer organization that focuses on helping the poor families start small businesses. And per Mr. Evans' request, I'll keep the intro nice and short and sweet. Mr. Evans.
Thank you.
Well, and I'll try to follow suit and kind of keep it short and sweet. Good to be back with you. I was with you maybe a year or so ago and enjoyed that, and living right here in the neighborhood. You know, I've lived here almost 20 years, and I walked here this morning and walked that morning. So it's good to join in with some neighbors from here. As Ashley mentioned, we are an all-volunteer organization, and so I'm one of the volunteers. I just happen to be a full-time volunteer. And maybe I'm kind of doing my Peace Corps thing at the end of the career instead of the beginning. But it's interesting that in Honduras we work with a lot of Peace Corps, and there are a number of Peace Corps who do it much later in their career. And many of them say, you know, they couldn't afford to do it when they were in their 20s, so you know, in their 50s they can. I was just recently at the 11th annual conference on Honduras. And it's a conference where all of the NGOs that are working in Honduras, and by the way, if you're not familiar, Honduras is the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and it has been second poorest for a long time. Peace Corps went there roughly 50 years ago, and they were the second poorest then, and they still hold that unfortunate position. And so this was the 11th annual conference on Honduras, and it was held in Honduras. The first, I think, 3 years it was held here in Washington. But since then, it's been in Honduras, and U.S. Ambassador to Honduras was there, the chief of USAID, the president of Honduras. And so I was there and was one of the guest speakers to talk about how to move out of this pattern of being the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, which is what Art for Humanity is addressing. And what I was going to mention is that there were roughly 200 people in attendance, and I'm going to guess that 8 or 10 of them were from Rotary clubs. And they were wearing Rotary Club shirts and their Rotary emblems, and I don't know for sure how many were there, but I sat at one session at a table with 4 or 5, and they were from Pennsylvania, and I think from some different clubs. And anyway, so just kind of interesting to, and that was only like 2 weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago I was in one Rotary meeting, so to speak, and sharing breakfast, and here I am in another one. So good to be with you. As Ashley mentioned, kind of the core of what we do is help people begin small businesses. And when we first began, most of those businesses tended to be art and craft, because women could do that in their home while they're watching their children and not have any, you know, commuting expense or anything like that. And so that's why we, in the early years, we called ourselves Art for Humanity, because that's what we're using, art to help humanity. And but now we've diversified and grown in terms of the projects that we do, and it includes almost anything that you can imagine, from welding to farming to bicycle repair, tire repair, auto body work, whatever it is that people know how to do, we help them to begin a business doing that. And very often, before they can begin that business, because many of them are home-based, they first need a home. So their early work is in building a home, and then typically out of that home, they will initiate a business. And like I say, you know, it's all sorts of things, from sewing and retail work, and includes still includes art. And but a few years ago, and I'm in Honduras about half of the time, so a week from Monday I'll be back there. And it occurred to me a while back that Honduras is creating poor. They're like a factory for creating poor, faster than we and the Peace Corps and World Vision and all of the big and little charities together can address. And in some sense, we're not accomplishing much. Now, to the individual families that we work with, we're obviously accomplishing a lot. People are able to educate their children. They now have a home. They've initiated a business. And so it makes a difference to those individuals. It's kind of like the story that we all know about the guy walking on the beach, picking up starfish and throwing them back. And somebody says, well, it doesn't make any difference. You're not making any difference. He said, well, it does to that one. And so to those that we work with, it does make a difference. But in terms of looking at the bigger picture, it's really not. And so what we have been doing, that is Art for Humanity, is the same thing almost every charity is doing working in Honduras, and that is at the grassroots level, helping individual poor families. But that doesn't change what's creating the poverty. That doesn't change the system that's just, it's a system that's just generating. And that's why the Peace Corps has been there for 50 years, done excellent, excellent work. And yet, many of the volunteers are very discouraged because this lack of progress. Honduras has the worst educational system for sure in Latin America, and I heard at this conference in the Western Hemisphere. And I think that's at the core of the reason for their long-term poverty. Anyway, make a long story short, a few years ago, and when I was here a year or so ago, we talked about the Leadership University being in its embryonic phase. And so now, while we're still working with the individual poor families, and we will always do that, in addition, we've added now a different dimension, and that is to try to address the causes of poverty kind of from the top down. And the essence of it is to change the system there that's generating all this poverty is not something that gringos can do. It's something that only Hondurans can do. But with the worst education system in maybe all of the Western Hemisphere, they don't have the wherewithal. They don't know how to do it. There's a variety of private colleges in Honduras. There's big public colleges. In all of the colleges, there's not one class offered in leadership. I don't think there's a class offered in ethics. And if you know anything about Latin America, you know, that's a great big need. So our idea is to begin the Leadership University. Now, university conjures up the wrong kinds of images, and it's probably not a very good name, but Leadership College would be a much better name. The problem is, in Spanish, college is high school. So if we call it the Leadership College, Hondurans would hear it as being a high school. And so now we're toying with some other names. Maybe call it Institute, maybe call it Center, maybe call it something else, because it's going to be very small. Probably never have more than 100 students. But the focus of the curriculum will be on ethical leadership. Part of the curriculum will focus as well, or all parts of the curriculum will focus on problem solving, on analytical thinking, on those kinds of things that Hondurans just don't learn to do. Honduran education is based on rote memorization. And if you're familiar with Spanish, at about the third grade level, you can read every Spanish word that's ever been written because it's a phonetic language. And so you can take a third grader and they can read the newspaper. They haven't a clue what it means, but you'd never know it from their reading. So it's unlike English, where you sort of kind of have to know the meaning of the word in order to be able to read it. Just the structure of our language is different in that way. And so that kind of carries out into all that they do. And so they really don't learn to think or learn to analyze. And so that's a key component. Now, One of the reasons I'm saying all this is to say we want you to come and teach. We are an all-volunteer organization. It is an English-speaking college. We want people to come not just to teach academic things. Academic things are important, but there's a lot of other things that are important that are not necessarily academic. For example, time management. Somebody come and talk, Latin Americans have never heard, they don't know the concept of time management. The idea of goal setting, the idea of strategic planning. There's so many skills that I know you have just because of who you are and where you live and the fact that you're in this club, that you could come and teach. And if you look at our website, and the website's listed on the brochure there on your table, we're set up that you could come and teach for as little as a weekend. We'd like you for longer than that, but there's a lot of things that you could teach in a weekend. You could probably do something significant about time management in a weekend. And then somebody else will come later and add to that on another weekend. And I use the word weekend loosely. I just mean a day, 2 or 3 days. It could be midweek, could be weekend, whatever. The idea is that these students will, upon graduation, and during class time, they're preparing to run for public office. So we'd like people to come and talk about, if I was a freshman in college and I knew I was going to run for public office, what are the 5 things I'd start doing right now? And, I'd start learning in my village who are the movers and the shakers. I'd start networking with, these are the 5 things I would do if I was going to run. So you probably know people who have run for office. Some of you have run for office even in this club or in this organization. And the principles apply. Somebody that could come and talk about grassroots networking. You guys do that. If you're in business, you're familiar with grassroots networking. So there's things like that that you could come and teach.